Hi, my name is Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. So the first book that I read in the month of June was Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski, and I did a buddy read with this with Erica over at Perks of Books, the Perks of Books, and I really enjoyed it. It was really good read. This book is basically about Geralt of Rivia, and he's a witcher, and the witcher is basically a person with enhanced abilities that goes out hunting monsters for pay. And they're pretty much outcasts, so people don't really like them, but they hire them to take care of monsters from time to time. And he has a ward now named Ciri, and basically Ciri is a child of destiny, and she has a special ability that no one really understands. So basically, this book, and that power is making her a pretty important figure. So basically, this book is about him trying to keep her safe and find out what power she indeed has. Now, this is actually the third book that you're supposed to read in the series. I didn't read the two before it, so after I finished reading that, I went and I picked up The Last Wish, which is basically about Geralt of Rivia doing his Witcher duties. He's going around. It's a bunch of short stories of him going around and hunting monsters. And this is the first book in the series you're supposed to read. And I am reading The Sword of Destiny this month in July, so I'll be caught up basically with the whole story soon. Both of those books were great, amazing. I love the world building. I love the characters. And I hope that going forward throughout the series, that it remains just as good. So, a nonfiction read of the month was King Leopold's Ghost, a story of greed, terror, and heroism in colonial Africa by Adam Hochschild. And this was simply amazing book. It tells the story of the Belgian Congo, of how it was acquired by the Belgian King Leopold, the atrocities that went on there, and then the people who exposed it and basically led the world's first humanitarian effort. And he did a really good job at bringing forward the information about this time period, because a lot of it had been when at least before he started writing this book, had been buried and pretty much forgotten. And even when he started to dig up a lot of information for this book, a lot of the African voices are not present because no one really got their thoughts on it, or have been hidden in archives. It wasn't really brought to light during the efforts to stop the atrocities going on there. So basically, King Leopold acquired the Belgian Congo, today known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, as his own personal property, not even as a property of the state of Congo, but his own personal property. And basically, rubber began to become a commodity, and there's a lot of rubber to be had in the Belgian Congo, and in a rush to get as much wealth out of it as possible, the people there were forced to work in terrible conditions. If they didn't meet quota, their families were taken hostage to ensure that they did. The porters who were carrying the equipment were basically worked to death, and all this was just kind of kept hush hush in the Belgian Congo. Things just went on like that, as if it was normal, until people began to take notice, and then spoke here in the United States and in England and across Europe, talking about how terrible it was there. And basically, out of that was born this movement to stop the atrocities there. So this was a really good book if you're interested in African history or the colonialism in Africa, and especially in the Congo. This is a very good and eye-opening book to read. My graphic novel read of the month was The Watchmen by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons. And this graphic novel is considered one of the greatest graphic novel comic book series of all time. It is basically set in an alternate universe where the world is on the brink of nuclear war. The world is a lot darker, it's a lot meaner, it's a lot grittier. That being said, this book has adult themes in it and adult content, so this is definitely not for a younger audience, 18 and older. And basically, you have in this world in like the 60s, in like the 50s and 60s, costume heroes took to the streets to fight crime, and these aren't like super powered people there. There's normal people who don costumes to fight crime, and they kind of had the optimism of the post-war years. But eventually, leading into like the 70s and 80s, that optimism kind of leaves, and they retire, and the world just goes just continues into this further downhill into like darkness. And so basically, it's the costume heroes dealing with that darkness as one of their own, as some of their own are being assassinated and killed, and it seems that there's this big conspiracy behind it. So they go to investigate it, and in the end, it comes down to do the ends justify the means? And it was the one big question in this book, and also your perception of the world and how that impacts you and what you do in life. So if you look at the world and you think that the world is dark and that it's nothing good can be done in this world, how does that affect you, and how do you decide to impact the world at large? So this was a really good book. It was really heavy, so I couldn't read it straight through like I did like other comic book series I've read, but it was really good. And if you're into graphic novels, I think you would like this one. So my poetry read of the month was the Iliad by Homer. I don't think this needs a recap, but in case you don't know, it's basically about the Greeks and the Trojans are fighting over Helen, who's been kidnapped by Paris and taken to Troy. And in the start of this book, the best fighter of the Greeks, Achilles, says he's sitting it out because he's been disrespected and he's not going to fight anymore. And then the book basically goes on the consequences, telling the story of the war between the Greeks and the Trojans without Achilles on the field and the consequences of that. So this book was okay. It the things that bogged me down kind of took away from the reading experience. So a lot of long similes to describe things. A lot of saying like this guy killed this guy and then he killed this guy. Could deal without that. But I also recognized the audience that it was for. It was for an audience that it was spoken to. So it wasn't someone sitting down reading it. It was spoken to. And back then it didn't have like TVs and things like that. So you had to describe things in like similes like he does in this book, or in long similes, or talking about the catalog in chapter 2 when they do the catalog of ships, saying where everyone came from in Greece. That would have been important for someone living in Greece to hear that, hey, that person came from my hometown. So it was good. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was okay read. But along with the reading the Iliad, I also read the Song of Achilles, and I really enjoyed that. Madeline Miller did a really good job at melding together all these different Greek myths about Patroclus and Achilles and the gods and the Trojan War and Paris and Helen and all the other characters in this epic, and kind of pulling it all together to tell this story. And basically, the Song of Achilles is about it's basically narrated by Patroclus. He is telling the story of his own life and his relationship with Achilles, and it was just really well done. I really enjoyed it. The same author has written another book called Circe, and I think I'm going to read that at some point. I'm not sure when. It's going to be probably a while, but I'll definitely read that at some point because I really enjoy Song of Achilles. Another book that I read was A Thousand Shall Fall by Susie Mundy, and this book was given to me by a friend, and it is about a family of Seventh-day Adventists living in Germany during World War II. The story follows the father who was drafted or conscripted into the German army to fight for the Nazis, and basically how he tries to stay true to his faith, fighting in the Nazi army for basically an army and regime that he doesn't believe in. And meanwhile, his wife is back at home trying to take care of the kids and trying to keep her faith and keep her kids strong in their faith while they're going through all of this. And it's really good, inspiring story of how like this family struggles to keep their faith in a time where a very dark time in history. And when things look to be like ending the rope, the family insisted that they keep their trust in God, and then like something else will open up for them. There was no food, then suddenly they will have food. If it was if like they needed to find clothes. Then like boom, there was a box of clothes there for them. So they never really had want for anything throughout most of the war. Most interesting story or interesting part of this book was the father actually threw away his pistol early in the war. He did not carry a weapon. He only carried around a wooden gun, a wooden gun that was this polished black, this piece of wood polished black that looked like a gun, and he kept that throughout the whole war, and no one knew. Similar story to the guy from Hacksaw Ridge, who was also a Seventh Day Adventist. The guy was played by Andrew Garfield. That was a movie that came out a couple of years ago, who didn't carry a gun at all, and actually helped save a lot of his fellow soldiers over in the Pacific Theater. So this was a really good book, and I'm really glad my friend allowed me to read it. So the last book that I read in the month of June was the 30 Years' War. This is my quarterly read. I read this or I was supposed to read it, from April to June. I actually read it mostly in, last part of May and June. And this book was really hard to read. It was just an info dump, a lot of names, a lot of cities, really hard to keep up with. It was just a lot of information. Also, it took 260 pages to get to the actual war, which I was not expecting at all. So the purpose of this book was to show that the 30 Years' War was not mainly a religious war, but that was really mainly driven by the geopolitical politics at the time. Even though religion played a huge part in this war, the schism between Catholics and Protestants. Also, he wanted to give equal attention to the last half of the war, which in many histories he said is not really given a lot of attention, because most of the sighting and flashy stuff happens in the first half of the 30 Years' War. But like I said, this book is mainly for. This book is like an info dump. It's just a lot of names and places. If you're not familiar with them before, it's really hard to get familiar with them in this book because so much information is thrown at you. This is like for the guy who kind of knows about the 30 Years' War from many different other sources, and then wants to buy this to have it like a one-stop get-all for all the information on the war. So as a casual reader, I do not recommend this. You have to be like a fanatic for the 30 Years' War, I feel, in order to enjoy this book. I mean, I learned a lot, but it wasn't really an enjoyable read. So that's it for me. That was what I read in June. What did you guys read in June, and did you enjoy it? If you did, please let me know in the comment section below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GhostReads28, and also on Goodreads. The link to that is down in the description box below. So guys, as always, keep reading.